No matter how great a story starts off in its beginning and middle, a mishandled ending can quickly burn through whatever goodwill a storyteller has built with their audience, as some storytellers have found out the hard way. In the previous videos in this series, we discussed how the three traditional dramatic phases of setup, confrontation, and resolution are themselves comprised of 6 universal character actions, or acts, and analyzed the actions of the setup and confrontation phases. In this video, we'll break down the final 2 actions of the resolution phase, trying a long shot, and living in a new situation. Obviously, we'll be talking about story endings using specific examples, so there will be spoilers for all these popular novels and films. So check the description below for the full list if you're worried there's something you might have missed. Also, in the description you'll find a link to my book, The Story Structure Secret: Actions and Goals. This video series only scratches the surface of all the information in the book, so if you haven't read it yet, go ahead and grab your copy today. And as always, be sure to show your appreciation by hitting that like button, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe now to stay up to date with more mind-blowing storytelling tips and techniques. Dramatic Phase 3: Resolution. Now that the central conflict came to a head in the confrontation phase of the story, the character and antagonist know exactly who they're up against and what's at stake. The two sides now face off to resolve the central conflict once and for all. In addition to resolving the main through line of the story, this dramatic phase should resolve all the subplots and character arcs, and pay off any remaining setups planted throughout the story. And at the end of this phase, we'll generally get a brief glimpse or allusion to what life is like for the character once the central conflict has been resolved. Act 5: Trying a long shot. The 5th act effectively serves as the climax of the story, where the character and the main force of antagonism face off in a final, winner-takes-all showdown. And while that term may make it seem geared solely towards action-adventure stories, this same structural element applies to subdued dramas, comedies, and even stories where the antagonist is a concept as opposed to a living entity. After enduring the devastating failure of his doomed plan at the low point in Act 4, and bouncing back from it at the newfound resolve turning point, the character now knows his chances of victory over the forces of antagonism are extremely slim. His only chance of success lies in trying a long shot. Knowing he is outmatched, the character uses his limited resources to formulate and enact an ambitious but improbable plan to defeat the antagonist. Having dealt the character a stunning defeat near the end of Act 4, the antagonist often believes him to no longer be a credible threat. The character too now understands the antagonist's strategic advantages. As a result, the character's long shot in this act may seem far-fetched or extreme, with a very small chance of success, but often employs a clever use of strategy that the antagonist doesn't anticipate, as a means for the character to gain the upper hand. Goal 5: The Ultimate Goal. The reason the character is willing to go to such extreme lengths and implement a last-ditch plan with a small chance of success is because he now finally understands the ultimate goal of the story. His defeat at the end of Act 4 gave him a taste of what life or the world will be like if the antagonist is victorious, and he is now willing to do whatever it takes to thwart the antagonist's plan. The ultimate goal is generally a larger scale version of the character's penultimate goal in Act 4. In fact, the failure of the character's doomed plan in Act 4 is often because he isn't thinking large enough in scale. In Star Wars, Luke's penultimate goal is to rescue Leia from being executed on the Death Star. While he does succeed in this goal, losing Obi-Wan in the process, the princess and the entire Rebel Alliance is soon threatened with annihilation again. This is because the true ultimate goal for Luke is to destroy the Death Star once and for all, at least until the sequel, and the other sequel. In Avatar, Jake's Act 4 goal is to save the Almatakaya clan from the humans' gunships by convincing them to leave Home Tree. Having failed in this, his goal expands to saving all of the Na'vi on Pandora by driving the humans from the planet. In the 4th act of Iron Man, Tony's goal is to take his weapons out of the hands of the Ten Rings terrorist group. But the ultimate goal of the story is to defeat Obadiah, who's not only been the one supplying the terrorists with weapons in the first place, but has also been building his own version of Tony's suit to use for sinister plans. The ultimate goal is the goal at the heart of the story.
Free your mind.
And as such, ties heavily into the character's arc. In order to achieve the ultimate goal, the character must abandon his flawed outlook and embrace the crux of change to reach his full potential. Opposition 5: Ultimate Opposition. As we established in the first video in this series, the opposition the character faces to his evolving goals strengthens as he progresses through the 6 acts. In Act 5, the character faces the strongest opposition he has faced in the story, as the antagonist attempts to defeat him once and for all, often throwing the full force of his superior resources at the character. In Avatar, the Colonel and the company send all of their available gunships and firepower to nuke the Tree of Souls. In comparison, Jake's bow and arrow wielding Na'vi are heavily outmatched. After she's abandoned by Maui in Act 4 of Moana, the titular little princess returns to Te Fiti's island by herself to face off with the demon goddess Takai. In Get Out, Chris squares off in one-on-one confrontations to the death with each member of the Armitage family, culminating in being shot at by a fully psycho Rose. Turning Point Catalyst 5, All is Lost. Although the character has some initial success, he eventually loses whatever upper hand his unexpected Longshot afforded him, as the antagonist's tactical superiority appears to be too much to overcome. At this point, it appears that all is lost for the character and his allies as their plan comes to the precipice of failure. In The Matrix, Neo is shot and seemingly killed by Agent Smith, as Sentinels simultaneously breach the hull of the Nebuchadnezzar and threaten to kill the rest of the crew. In Wreck-It Ralph, the Cybugs overrun Sugar Rush and destroy the finish line before Vanellope can cross. And while all the other characters evacuate, Ralph can't get Vanellope through the portal because as a glitch, she can't leave the game. In Star Wars, Vader and his team of TIE fighters make short work of the red and gold rebel squadrons, leaving Luke and his few remaining allies to make what appears to be a suicide run. Turning Point 5, The Final Push. If the 5th act serves as the climax of the story, then the final turning point can rightly be thought of as the climax of the climax. After the character is brought to the edge of defeat at the All is Lost catalyst, he now decides to make one last stand against the antagonist, pulling out what little he has left in his stores, or a final trump card he's been holding on to. After China and its allies declare war with the aliens in Arrival, and the US moves to shut down their own communications with the aliens, Louise uses her new Slaughterhouse 5 powers to flash forward to a future award ceremony she attends with Chinese General Shang. The information he gives her in the future allows her to convince him to call off the attack on the aliens in the present. At the All is Lost catalyst in Good Will Hunting, Lambo threatens to have Will reincarcerated for failing to participate in their math sessions. Knowing his time is running out with Will, Sean makes a final attempt to break through Will's psychological issues, telling Will about his own abusive childhood, rolling the dice on his analysis of Will's neurosis and making Will acknowledge that the source of his childhood trauma is not his fault. At the final push in the Hunger Games, the game makers unexpectedly revoke their previous rule change, allowing 2 winners from the same district. Knowing the capital will need at least 1 winner for the post-games pageantry, Katniss correctly surmises that if she and Peeta both threaten to eat the poisonous nightlock berries, the game makers will capitulate and allow them both to live. The establishment of the deadliness of the berries when they kill another tribute also demonstrates how a 5th act solution to the character's situation is often set up earlier in the story. In Act 4 of Gravity, Dr. Stone nearly knocks herself out trying to extinguish a fire on the ISS. She later uses the force of the compressed gas in the extinguisher to propel herself from the derelict Soyuz to the Chinese space station. Tony Stark nearly kills himself in the 3rd act of Iron Man when he takes his suit so high into the atmosphere the electronics freeze up. When he's confronted with Obadiah's suit in Act 5, he implements this knowledge to freeze Obadiah's suit, sending him seemingly plummeting to his death. Wreck-It Ralph learns about the Cybugs' attraction to the beacon in Act 2, and later uses this information to make an improvised beacon to destroy the Cybugs and King Candy. Similarly, in Get Out, Chris learns in Act 3 his camera flash has a freeing effect on the minds trapped in the sunken place, and uses this knowledge to bring Walter out long enough to neutralize Rose and kill himself/Grandpa Armitage. Act 6, Living in a New Situation. Having defeated the forces of antagonism, or in the case of tragedies which I'll cover in another video, failing to defeat the antagonist, the character effectively resolves the central conflict. As a result, the character is now shown, or alluded to be, living in a new situation his actions have brought about. The new situation is often a resolution to the imperfect situation he faced at the beginning of the story. As we discussed in our examination of the setup phase, a major contributor to his imperfect situation was his initial desire for or against changing his initial situation. By undertaking the events of the story, he has either changed his world to achieve his initial desire, undergone significant growth that caused his desire to change, or sometimes a combination of the two. Jake Sully begins Avatar as a paralyzed ex-warrior who's lost his sense of purpose. His initial alignment with the Colonel and the company reflects his belief that the militaristic, human way will revalidate him. But learning the ways of the Na'vi fundamentally changes him in a way that inspires him to change his world, and in doing so he achieves his initial desires for both mobility and purpose by acquiring a fancy new avatar body and finding a sense of purpose far greater than he knew as a Marine. At the beginning of Star Wars, Luke desired to leave his boring farm life and go on daring space adventures. By agreeing to aid Obi-Wan in learning the Force, he ultimately achieves this goal by almost single-handedly saving the entire Rebel Alliance. In The Silence of the Lambs, Clarice desires to graduate the academy, become an agent, and more importantly, validate her place in the world of law enforcement. She achieves all of these things by tracking down Buffalo Bill and rescuing Catherine Martin, changing her world in the process. The new role. At the end of Act 1, the character agreed to take on a new role. In many ways, stories are about the character learning to fill this new role to the best of their ability. In order to ultimately defeat the antagonist and resolve the central conflict, the character becomes the epitome of their new role.
I am Iron Man.
At the end of Act 1 in Moana, she becomes a Voyager, the first to leave her island in years. By the end of the film, she is leading her people to find new lands. The new role Neo assumes is a man awoken from the Matrix. By the end of the film, he is the epitome of this, able to completely bend the rules of the Matrix to his will. In Arrival, Dr. Louise Banks becomes an alien language translator. Her ultimate understanding of the heptapod language at the end of the film not only allows her to communicate with them freely, but also move through time the same way they do. Although I said earlier the new situation is a resolution to the character's imperfect situation, it is often still not a perfect situation in and of itself, even if it is somewhat improved. I think this is because there's a certain amount of poignancy in acknowledging the imperfection of the real world. Although Louise unlocks the alien's language and averts a war in Arrival, she moves forward knowing her marriage to Ian will end in divorce and their daughter will die at a young age. While Chris is victorious over the Armitages in Get Out, his worldview is essentially shattered by their extraordinary level of duplicity and betrayal. Even the happily ever after endings in children's movies are shown to be temporary with the arrival of a sequel, where the new situation from the previous story has slowly given rise to a new, imperfect situation. This progression from imperfect situation to new, improved situation is reflective of how life operates. The point of stories is to learn through the experiences of others. By watching characters succeed through adversity, we learn that obstacles can be overcome. So when the next imperfect situation arises, in our own lives or the sequel, we know the steps to follow to transform it into a new situation. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with new posts. And don't forget to pick up your copy of Actions and Goals, The Story Structure Secret, or visit sixactstructure.com for in-depth breakdowns of your favorite novels and films. Thanks for watching.